All right, we're recording.
All right.
So your name is Robert James Cross,
Yes.
and you wrote me with some issues that you had or have with one of my videos. So
Yes.
tell me what your issue is.
So you said that a lot of the people whom you dub as monarchists
Yeah.
um, have this kind of want to reestablish the Holy Roman Empire, and I mean I know that that wasn't the main cause of your or the main crux of your video, but it was more along the lines of that they were um, a type of Nazi, and I don't know how many monarchists you've, I guess, met in the past, but the ones that I've met, which have been very few, probably like two or
There's
three.
not a lot of you guys.
Yeah, not a lot left, I guess. Um, they kind of believe in the same things that I believe, which is that there should be a more of a constitutional monarchy more than I guess absolute or divine right type monarchy.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So that was the main issue with the video that you had put up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
That's fine. You know, I have met monarchists before. Again, not a lot, because there's just not a lot of monarchists out there.
Yeah.
Which leads me to believe like the idea of a monarchist revolution is impossible, unless for some odd reason there's like widespread conversion to monarchism. But the monarchists that I have met, because I am a Christian, so the
Yes.
monarchists that I have met have been Catholic
Yes.
or some kind of Protestant.
Mm-hmm.
And those monarchists, from my research of monarchism, it just seems like monarchists tend to be of that strata, ideological strata. Now, you've introduced me to a new faction of monarchism, which
Yes.
honestly I haven't heard before. Left wing
Mm-hmm.
monarchism or constitutional monarchism, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you've seen a lot of my videos.
I've seen a few.
I've seen
Yeah.
a few of them, but I did another
Mm-hmm.
video a number of months ago
Mm-hmm.
stating that the idealization of a form of government, to me, I think is inept. Now, that is not to say that monarchism is evil. That would be foolish of me because there have been righteous monarchs in the past, just
Of
like there
course.
have been righteous politicians or righteous even dictators in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that the idea of saying, well, I wish we could bring back the Roman Empire, or I wish we could transform America into a new state where there's a king, I think that is inept because it's disconnected from reality. And it also ignores the reality of human sin. Right? I don't know if you believe in the concept of sin, but the reality that we are all filled with the predisposition to do wrong or to be corrupt.
Yeah, I get that, and that's why, again, there should be some sort of place guards or walls put in place with a monarchy. And one of my, I guess, beliefs in reestablishing a monarchy, especially in America, would be that number one is that there's no hereditary succession. So a monarch, is put in place. Their son, their daughter, whoever, cannot be put in place after. It would be up to a regent who essentially would be like their right hand kind of teacher, kind of like Aristotle and Alexander the Great. It would be like if Alexander the Great died, and then Aristotle was the one who got to pick whoever took over Greece after him, or the whatever the world that Alexander had conquered after that. Um, and I think that in doing so, that would make it easier for the next person to take over to be chosen, because then the people like me, you, whoever was, around when that was happening, to trust that that person had the best, future in mind
the
when they
best
were choosing.
intentions, right?
Yeah, the best intentions,
Or the best
exactly.
interest. So it would be kind of like I know this is not absolutely equal, but it would be kind of like your own Supreme Court, like a body of judges who are very intellectual and they decide what is best for the country. This person is best for the country.
Yes, exactly. Um, the Now one of the reasons why I guess fall into this category of wanting a monarch and what have you is because I believe a monarch would be a great benefit to America because I feel like they're seen not just right now, but in history as a nonpartisan head of state. They have no political affiliation. They're supposed to represent all people, and that means that doesn't not just one race, but all races, all creeds, all sexual orientations, everything. Not just white people or the Europeans or what have you. And then the other thing would be is that a monarch would not be beholden to lobbyists or corporations, and they would have to, again, kind of choose whatever the people wanted. And because that's their whole goal is to stay as, righteous to the people as humanly possible. There's no limit to potential in that kind of governmental system because the progress in science, art, would not be swayed by political doctrines from any kind of affiliated party.
Okay. So what I would say to that is, for one, what you say sounds great in paper, with the exception of sexual orientation. I don't agree with tolerating me as a Christian. I don't agree with tolerating homosexuality or I call it Sodom. But
Yeah.
you're a liberal, and that's your position.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it sounds good on paper, right? But how
Yes.
would you be able to guarantee that it's going to be like that perpetually? It's again, this is my issue with people making idealistic observations is that it all sounds great. Like, hey, everything's gonna be. I'm not saying you're saying this, but just as an
Yeah. Yeah.
example, everything's gonna be for free. Everything's gonna be, provided to the people, and it never works out that way.
Oh
So
well,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely don't agree with like I've told you before in the messages and stuff that idealism is also a bad thing. And I mean, I do understand that some of what I say kind of falls into idealism in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but I forget who said it. I believe it was C.S. Lewis who said that humans biologically have a desire for hierarchy. And so
True.
you saying that there should be no form of government, or that you believe that no form of government can really bring about any kind of peace. I think that, and like I told you before, anarchy too is something that I kind of.
I never said there should be no form of government.
Yeah.
I said that no form of government is going to be a guarantor of peace. That
Yeah.
I did say, but it's not going to be a guarantor of perfection because humans, by our very nature, are not perfect. We are
Oh, of
fallen
course
as
not. Yeah,
humans.
of course not.
We're,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are we are susceptible to corruption, susceptible to
Mhm.
greed and avarice. That's why I don't. That's why, for example, like I read a lot about medieval history.
Yes.
I used to be a big reader of medieval literature. I read about not all of them, but I read about a number of the wars that took place in the Middle Ages, and also I read a lot about a number of the wars that took place kind of after that in the 17th century, specifically the 30 Years' War. And there
Yes.
were kings in those days, and there were kings in the Middle Ages, and there were feudal lords, and like
Yeah,
there
of
was
course.
knights and nobles,
Yeah.
and people still killed each other.
They did.
People still committed massacres. There was all sorts of atrocities that were committed in those days.
Mhm.
Read the worst war to have ever hit Europe before the First and Second World Wars, and some people even argue that it's worse than the First and Second World Wars, was the 30 Years' War.
Yeah,
millions of
30.
millions of people were killed, and but yet, they were kings in those days, and they were like
Yes.
viscounts, and yeah, then people still killed
Yeah.
each other. So yeah, go ahead.
No, that's true. And like I said, humans, like you said too, humans are, full of folly and what have you, and if I guess you want to call it sin if you're a Christian, but I feel like I have more faith, I guess, in humanity than most people do, and that we can kind of see these things coming. I mean, what is it? A lot of political theorists have said that we're in the most peaceful time of all history, I guess, right
You're
now,
right. That's
which I
correct.
don't know whether or not that's true. I
I
don't know
think
whether you agree with that.
it's in. I would say we were more peaceful, probably more peaceful a number of decades ago than now. But relatively speaking, we've been pretty good. But
Yeah.
that's gradually ending.
Yeah. No, it is, and we're getting, especially with the country the way it is now, we're getting a lot more divided. Not more. I don't think theoretically, I don't think more divided than ever before, but just more divided in a way that is kind of captured on big media and what have you, and so it's easier for people to see. If we didn't have those reminders every 5 seconds that somebody is against you, somebody hates you, somebody doesn't want you around. I think that people would get along more peacefully, like they did back, like you said, a couple decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read Hobbes?
Very little.
Okay, so Hobbes had a thing in Leviathan where he talked about three systems of government that he said historically have been the most, I guess, peaceful in nature. Not peaceful, but I mean, like, they've lasted the longest.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one was monarchy,
Yeah.
Which of course is is one person ruling. Then there was aristocracy,
Mm-hmm.
which is many, and then democracy, which is supposed to be all. I don't believe right now we are in a democracy in the United States. I don't know what you believe exactly in that sense. But I think that if we had, and I think that monarchy, fortunately enough, kind of has all three of those levels already. I mean, if you've seen historically, monarchies usually have a court, which would be seen as an aristocracy a little bit on the bottom, and then of course the democracy of the people
Mm-hmm.
underneath, all the way at the end. That could, again, my main love of monarchy is the kind of the what have you, when they can rise up and kind of not, like the French Revolution, when they got rid of the monarch
the elites
and the
killed the king.
aristocracy.
There were a lot of elites involved in the French Revolution.
Yeah, that too. No,
And,
of course. Yeah,
and it's a myth. It's one of the biggest myths about the French Revolution, is that it was just a bunch of poor peasants who just wanted to get rid of the rich, and that's kind of the ideal that they give you in high school.
Yeah, of course.
But the reality is that, and I know, I mean, I think you also kind of have an idea about the French Revolution that you find admirable and worthy of.
I've seen, I've read a lot of books about the French Revolution and how a lot of the, like you said, elites were kind of taken out of the country and brought to Britain for like safe passage or what have you.
Yes, and
so they weren't killed.
Members
and then,
of the clergy also.
Yeah, so I know about all
members
that.
of the clergy fled to England. Because they were killing all the priests and the nuns, and
exactly
what that had to do with freeing the people, I don't know. But the French Revolution, and you know this already, was done by a network of ideologues and political elites. And even before, when you talk about the French Revolution, it wasn't just 1789 happened, and no, it was decades in the making.
Oh yeah, of course.
There was all of these philosophers that came up. I mean, the most notable ones being Voltaire and Rousseau, and the big Enlightenment movement actually was being financed by some pretty big political players. There was, I think, it was King Friedrich II of Austria. There was a number of other big governmental figures who supported it. It was Philippe II in France. So there was definitely a network of elites who were supporting that and supporting the idea of revolution against monarchism and also against ecclesiastic, Christianity or the church, the institution of the church.
Yeah.
So the thing is that it's not just a king that rules.
Mhm.
You know this, and I know. You just
Of
said
course.
between the people and the king, there are all these like aristocrats and the court.
Yeah.
And Machiavelli talked a lot about this in his book The Prince. He talked
The
about
Prince.
how he compared the institution of the monarch with the institution of the sultan in the Ottoman Empire. And he
Yeah.
said that the sultan is kind of like this he really is a monarch. Like what he says goes. He may have his advisors and things like that, but what he says goes. Whereas with the European monarch, the Western European monarch, yes, there is a king, and he supposedly has all of this power, but he has all of these, courtly figures and notables who have influence over him. And a lot of these courtly members also represent certain interests in society, certain factions in society. This was one of the reasons why, for example, what was his name? It was King Rudolph of the Holy Roman Empire. He tried to appeal to the Protestants and said, okay, yeah, you can have more religious freedom, because he knew Protestantism was becoming very popular in his empire. And he wanted to prevent his empire from fragmenting. So it's not just a king. There are all these other people involved. So if we were to... the only way you could enact monarchy in America would be to have a revolution. And how would you, you would have a revolution, right? You would get rid of our three branches of government that we've had for hundreds of years. And then you would replace it with a monarchy, but you would have to appeal to all the different power structures that hold finance and power and influence in the United States to remain in power. Or else you would have to deal with another revolution. That's very difficult.
Yes and no. Because, so this is the thing. In a constitutional monarchy, what happens is that, of course, there's, like we had here in America, there are a set of rules that are kind of stipulated. And a lot of people get together, kind of like our form of government now, but a lot of people get together and they create these set of rules that the king or the monarch or whoever the ruler, have to abide by. And that's before this person is even put in place. So it's not like, again, the person's put in place and then we go, okay, now we come up with a rule. No, the rules are set far before the person is even put up into this position of power. And they're, again, chosen based on their ideas about whether or not they can provide the wants of the people. And the people do include the, aristocracy or the elites in America. But I think it would be a lot easier to kind of separate all these people in a constitutional monarchy than it is in our current state of government. And yeah, there should, I've always said that there should be a revolution in this country. It just doesn't, the form of government we have now, and you said that, you don't believe any system of government, right, can bring peace or any kind of thing like that.
No, I said that there's no such thing as a system of government that can guarantee a utopian ideal or some kind of perpetual peace. There's always going to be friction and chaos and things to deal with, and bad people to deal with.
Oh, well, yes, of course. But do you believe that the system of government we have now in the United States is really, good?
Well, I would say it's good enough. Because, hold on, you're breaking up a little bit. Hold on, man. Hold on.
Yeah.
You broke up a little bit there. You said something.
Okay.
You asked me.
Oh, no, I just said go on.
Okay. So I would say that we are good enough in the sense that, for one, if you look at the United States and compared to much of the rest of the world, the United States is number one when it comes to quality of life, or at least you can at least agree that it's definitely up on the list in quality of life. We are the global hegemony. we have a condition within our society in which the lowest 20%, the poorest 20% of our society is actually better off than much of the world. As far as, and you can look at all the statistics on this and the studies on this, as far as money-wise, we make more money as individuals more than a lot of people around the world. I used to live in a third world country. I used to live in Mexico, where, and in those days, I lived in the, I actually read your article on the election of Calderon over Obrador.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting because I was in Mexico when that happened. And
were you?
Yes, I was. And I remember they were blocking the roads and blocking the streets, and they were mad that Calderon won. But when I was living there, the average person was making $5 USD a day. $5, so 50 pesos a day at that time. That's what people were making. Whereas here in the U.S., we were making, minimum wage, $6, $7, $8 an hour. People working at Costco are making $10 an hour. No one is starving. They keep telling us that we're all overweight. You and I are having this political debate or discussion right now, and we're not killing each other. We are not dealing with civil war like a lot of, well, not a lot, but like a number of other countries are, like in Libya, like in Syria, especially in northern Syria, where it's been invaded by the Turkish government, soon to be the Ottoman Empire. We're not dealing with narco violence like in Mexico. We're not dealing with really any sort of seriously existential issues as a society. I don't see what the purpose of a revolution would be, and I don't see what the purpose of commencing something that would put literally hundreds of thousands of people's lives in jeopardy, because that's what a revolution would do. It would ultimately cause a civil war in this country, especially if you're introducing something as fringe as monarchism, because most people in the United States would not agree with monarchism. I mean, like we both agreed in the beginning of this discussion, there's literally a handful of you guys. So you would, another thing, I am not against the idea of monarchism. I'm actually not against the idea of a monarchy or a king. I have read a lot about the Middle Ages, my friend, and let me tell you, there were some good kings out there. There were some great kings out there. Okay, so for example, in Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church is the official religion of the state, right? Most people don't have an issue with that because most Russians, whether they go to church every Sunday or not, identify as Russian Orthodox. So it's like, oh, the Russian Orthodox Church is the religion of the state? Huh, great. Now, you have people in the United States who believe in this idea of, well, we should have a state religion in the United States, and these are also fringe people. But the idea of a state religion in the United States is completely inept, and it's really ignoring the reality of American society, where we have literally tens of thousands of different sects, different theological beliefs. Within the United States itself, Catholics can't even agree on what Catholicism is. The Catholic Church in America is very much divided between conservative and liberal, between, traditional Latin Mass and Novus Ordo. So I don't know how we would be able to enact, if we had a Protestant religion like, the Church of America, or like, I don't know, the Episcopalian Church is the official church of the United States. That would also be ludicrous, because it's like, well, most Americans identify as either evangelical or maybe just, I'm a Christian, and they're nominal Christians, but they really don't care. So it would be completely detached from reality to do something like that. So if you were to say, well, let's start a revolution, I don't know how you would be able to do that without the consent of by huge, I'm not even talking 50% of the population. You would have to get most people in America to agree with you on that, or else you would have a civil war or something, violent.
Yeah, of course. And that's the thing, is that eventually it's going to come to that. I feel like, especially on the road we're at now, with again, a lot of what media spews out and what have you, that makes people hate each other. We have, the 50% versus the 50% right now. Or I guess, like I said, little fringe groups here and there, whatever. But eventually that's going to come to a head. And whether or not that creates another civil war between, the right and the left, or whether that creates, kind of just revolution to get rid of the politicians that created the powder keg that became that civil war. I think that eventually that's going to take place. I don't know what's going to take the government's place after it, whether or not we're just going to go back to the way things were, just to, as some sort of nostalgia trip, and then everything's going to happen over and over again, kind of in a, cyclical nature. But again, I just believe it would be a lot easier if we had one person that was nonpartisan, head of the state, that we can look at as people to make decisions based on a set of rules, again, that we come up with together as a people that aren't like as radical or kind of fringe as make it out to be in a utopian society. I don't think that I also agree with you. A utopian society won't exist, but I think that we can all agree to disagree at certain points in a governmental system.
Well, like you just said, we have the 50-50, and we as a country are intensifying our hatred of each other. We're intensifying.
Exactly.
We're intensifying in this polarization of society, and I agree with you that anger is intensifying, especially when you have politicians like Trump, who kind of is within the context of a GOP politician, is kind of outside. Like he's very foreign. He's something very different. He's actually more radical than what we're used to. And I think, as far as immigration goes, he's probably our most radical president that we've had since for quite a long time. I know Hoover was probably the worst when it came to immigration, or one of the worst when it came to immigration. He did deport like over 1 million Mexican people. A lot of them were American citizens. It was pretty horrendous. I actually fear that something like that could happen again in the United States with the rise in anti-immigration sentiment. But another thing that worries me is this hatred between people. So, for example, conservatives will say, well, these people are all communists and they're enemies of society. And then the other side is going to say, well, these conservatives are enemies of society because they're against abortion and they hate women or whatever. And they have all of these different ideas. And what I worry about is sort of a Jacobin society, or like a Jacobin uprising happening. But I don't see that happening now. But if it would happen, it's going to happen in a long time from now. I could be wrong about that. But if you have a revolution, the country is so divided, they wouldn't even agree on what to do afterwards. And you could have a French Revolution style situation where people are killing each other. Even people within their own faction are killing each other. Look what happened with Robespierre. Like they killed him, and there were people around him who were killed. And so, but when you say, like we would have a civil war, and then I'm going to assume you think that a civil war would be an opportunity for you to enact what you want. You would have to get enough people influenced into monarchism before the civil war could happen. And,
of course.
And on top of that, have you ever read about the Lebanese Civil War that happened in the 70s? Happened in the 70s and 80s, and it didn't end until like 1990.
I know about it. I haven't read a lot about it.
Well, there were different factions in that civil war, and each one wanted to materialize their own utopian idea. So the Palestinians wanted to carve out their Palestinian state within Lebanon, and the Maronites wanted to establish their Maronite utopia, where only quote-unquote Phoenicians would live in Lebanon. The Shiites, of course, they wanted their own society, and then you had the Sunni Lebanese who wanted their own thing, and Lebanon is still divided today. But the thing is that none of them were really able to bring about what they wanted. They weren't really able to bring what they wanted into fruition. So the end result of the Lebanese Civil War was still a divided society, which we see today. And secondly, there was a lot of dead people, and I mean a lot of dead people. Oh, I think over 100,000 people were killed. You had massacres done on both sides. Palestinians butchered Maronites in Damour. Maronites butchered Palestinians in Sabra and Shatila. There was mass executions that were done. There was also Israel got involved. Israel got involved and bombed the hell out of Lebanon. The Syrians got involved, and eventually the Americans got involved, the French, the Italians. So if you were to have a civil war in the United States, you would have multiple factions killing each other, people who will never agree with each other, and then you would have outside influences as well. You would have probably the Russians. The Russians would be all over that. So I just don't see like why would we want the civil war? It just sounds like a complete nightmare.
Well, yeah, the again, a revolution or civil war would not be a pretty thing, just as it hasn't been in history past. Mm-hmm. But as you stated, Lebanon had their kind of civil war, and they couldn't agree. But people like me, monarchist people, we don't. Obviously, I'm not trying to push my ideas on anyone. You know what I mean? If you don't believe in that, I'm perfectly fine. But there are a lot of governmental structures that they want people to believe in these things with no kind of just shut up and do it kind of thing. So if there was a revolution or a civil war, and then a monarch wasn't put in place, and let's say we went back to the governmental structure that we're at now, people like me would probably just throw our hands up and say, all right, fine. It's like, that's just the way it's going to be. So again, that's not exactly, I know that it's not exactly a hard belief in that sense, but at the same time, it's not also, I'm not trying to get anyone to kind of join into a monarchist society with me, because a lot of people that are monarchists, and I've had a lot of discussions with people about this, believe that they'll be part of the court, which is why they want a monarchy. They're like, oh, of course I want a monarchy. I'm going to be part of the court if there ever is one. And I've never been somebody that believes that. I don't have a lot of money. I never really have my entire life. So I still see myself as a peasant, even if there was a monarch. And that's a very odd take in the monarchist kind of perspective.
So you just described yourself as a peasant, but you do know in the French Revolution, the peasants were some of the biggest victims.
Yeah, of course.
So maybe you would find yourself, like, how would you guarantee that you won't find yourself on the guillotine?
That's a very good question. Well, partly because I wouldn't necessarily call myself a royalist, because I'm not that either. Because royalists, whoever's put onto the throne, there's a lot of royalists in Britain still, who think that Queen Elizabeth is, the second coming of Christ and what have you. And I don't believe that. And the only time I've ever considered myself, I guess, the royalist was when I was going really deep into Louis XIV, reading a lot about his reign and what he did and what have you. And I thought to myself, I'm like, if we had a leader semi like that with some of the good qualities of Louis XIV, because obviously he had some shitty qualities too. He was extremely greedy. He built Versailles, for God's sake. All those things. If we had somebody that was a leader like that, or again, Alexander the Great is another person that I definitely look up to, and he was, his father was a complete, King Philip was a complete nutcase, and then Alexander shows up and he goes, you know what? He's like, it's time to, do some things that my father could never do, and then he did, and he was a great leader, died young, but and he treated everyone as equal as humanly possible, to the point where his followers, his soldiers, wanted him dead because he married a woman who was a Zoroastrian.
Didn't he marry an Afghan?
Yeah, exactly.
Bactrian, because he was making peace with the Afghans, so he married a girl from one of the tribal leaders over there, which is fascinating to read about. It's very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it was very ahead of its time, because, like I said, most people would be like, "Hey, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. This isn't the way. We didn't agree to this when you were put in charge. Da 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 da." And he was just like, "You know what? We all need to just get together." he wanted to unite all the places that he had conquered, essentially. And he couldn't do that with, by doing what, like you kind of talked about in your video, where, reestablishing the Holy Roman Empire and only making like it for, the Nazis want everything to be one race and what have you. It's like you can't unite people that way. That's not the way it works. And so, again, I don't... whoever the monarch would be in this monarchist society that I have, that we all have in our heads, all my monarchist buddies and me. In my eyes, I don't really have a position on who, like what race, what color, what creed, what sex, what sexual orientation, what they should be. I don't really care. I mean, if there was a black female queen, I mean, it's like, who at that point, it's like, who cares? Like, as long as they can make the decisions that make sure that there's at least a little bit more peace than we have currently in our system, because right now, yes, the United States is a very peaceful place, quote unquote, but it's not to the level that it could be. And I think that that's because we have a lot of these governmental, parties, these factions in the state and what have you, that are like pushing against each other and stopping things. We have there's the liberals who want everyone to be happy, but you have to kind of fall in line with them, and then you have the conservatives who want to control everybody, just like the liberals want to control everybody to make them happy. And it's like, and they fight constantly, but we only have two at the moment. We don't have anyone like kind of, again, on the fringe of any of that. So it's always a 50-50 split.
That's what I'm saying.
And
that's exactly
I hate being a centrist.
But that's exactly what I'm saying, is that country is so split. Like, how would this king be able to satisfy everyone? And how, like, who's to say that the king, or like you said it would be a group of intelligentsia who would elect the king, and supposedly, hopefully, they would have the interest of everyone in mind. But how would you stop these elites or these intelligentsia from having dogmas themselves? And how would you be able to stop these people from allowing their dogmas from influencing them? So, for example, like, we have a Supreme Court, and we have 9 Supreme Court justices, but the Supreme Court is kind of split between 2 different dogmas. One's liberal and one's conservative. We have 4 Supreme Court justices who are conservative. The rest of them are liberal, and they're also split. And they also have their own ideologies, and they also use their own positions to advance their own ideology, or to defend their own ideology, I should say. So, for one example of that is in Pennsylvania, there was a controversy about a Catholic adoption agency that doesn't want to give children to homosexual couples, and the homosexuals did a lawsuit, and then it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, is a majority conservative, is a majority conservative court, and so you have 4 justices who are sympathizing with the Catholic adoption agency. Now, if it was the other, I agree with that. But I'm just using it as an example. If it was the other way around and the liberals were the majority, they would sympathize with the homosexuals. So this intelligentsia that you speak of that would choose the king, they would inevitably, they would have their own dogmas. And they would want a king who would represent those dogmas. Kings are humans, and they are open to being influenced. Open, and we hear about these kings who are inept, who are impotent as kings, right? But they're ruled by someone else. Even Machiavelli talks about how if he were to even remove a king, what would have happened is the people close to the king would just go back to society and would rile up their factions. They would rally up, and then they would influence those factions in society. And God knows what they could do. They could raise an army. They could go to battle with a neighboring faction. All sorts of things could happen. You brought up the example of Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great was a great conqueror. But when he died, what happened? You had the Ptolemaics and Seleucids, and they all started vying for power. So
that's true.
So that's the thing, is you can't really prevent these sorts of things from happening. When you talk about for example, like, we would just put in like measures that would prevent certain things from happening. I mean, within our own country, when this country was founded, we also put in measures to prevent certain political branches from becoming too powerful. That's why we have the three branches of government. We have the Congress, we have the Supreme Court, and we have the executive branch. And more or less, they do cancel each other out. That's why when we hear about like, oh, we have Trump in office, but there's all these liberals in the Senate or the House. Oh, we have this Democrat. Oh, don't worry, the Republicans have the Senate, and the Republicans will cancel out the Democrats. And so, yes, Democrats will win battles. Republicans will win certain battles. But the good thing about our American system is that because we are divided, we at least have a system where both sides can more or less be appeased. More or less.
This is true. However,
but my point is that even with our, even though we've been here for hundreds of years, we've already enacted a system of measures and checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we still have people complaining.
That are put in place.
But we still have people complaining. People are still upset. So it's like even if you have a monarch, human beings have a way of messing up everything.
Oh well, no. Like I said, I don't believe that that'll ever change. There'll be people that hate the monarch. There'll be people that want to revolt, and do it over again. There'll be things like that. But the beauty of having one person at the head of state, like I said, is that it's nonpartisan. We don't have to. How would you be able to prevent that? Yeah.
How would you guarantee that it's nonpartisan? How would you guarantee that, like I said, the body of intelligentsia who would be there to choose the king? How can you prevent those people from becoming partisan?
Of course, there'd be a screening process. You know what I mean?
Who would determine the screening process? Who would determine that? Who would do the screening process?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, and believe me, I'm right there with you when I say when humans are flawed, they are extremely flawed. But there have been studies. We were talking about studies earlier that having someone who's a great leader in a country who we can all, most of the populace can look up to, helps keep things civil in a society. Helps keep things from being the way that they kind of sort of are right now in our current society. You and I speak from kind of a pedestal of privilege, just as we're, able to sit here and talk about these things and not worry about, the Gestapo or secret police busting at our doors and taking us to a gulag or something. But at the same time, why do we have to have these discussions? Why do we have to talk about, enacting certain, things into our government? And it's because, like you said, there's no such thing as a utopian society, and there never will be. So, yeah.
Well, in this discussion, I'm defending the status quo, and you're going against the status quo. And you said that we could have screeners and we could have measures and things like that. But my biggest concern about and I've done a couple of videos where I've said that ideologues will destroy us. And they would. Like if ideologues get what they want, they will destroy us as a society. They will. There's no doubt in my mind. Most people don't want war. Most people just want to be left alone. But the problem is that when you have a civil war, what you end up with is two factions who are a minority killing each other. By minority, I'm talking about the ones who have guns. Not
of course.
Not like overall society. But then you have the people who don't have guns, or they do have guns, but they don't want to fight, and they're just civilians in the middle of the bloodshed. And what eventually happens is you have a bunch of, like, the winning side takes over, and then you have a bunch of people who are like, well, I don't want to be under you. I don't want this sort of system. And then what do you do with those people? Like you yourself said, you would have people who would be against this monarch. What do we do with those people? Do we just allow them to live? Well, what if they start making propaganda against the king? Are you going to have freedom of speech? Are you going to ban freedom of speech? Because that would be a danger. That would be a danger to the throne if you allow people who are anti-monarchy. Not just against the king himself, but just anti-monarchy. To roam around saying we want to have a democracy, we want to have a republic.
This is true. But, like I said, I mean, I believe in individual rights. So I still think that what we have in place right now, our Constitution currently, is perfectly fine as a set of rules for what we have. But, and freedom of speech is in there, obviously. That's the first one. And I would not, if there was a monarch, I would not say in all actuality whether or not that would be a good thing to take away. I think it wouldn't be. But yes, that would be a difficult thing for society to deal with, are people against the king that would want to, or the monarch to kill them, or to,
have to kill
take over the
people. But you would have to kill lots of people. Like, tons of people would die. I mean, if you read about the founding of this country, right, George Washington, there's the story, we've all heard it, that there were people who said, George, be our king, and George was like, no, I'm not being your king.
No, he didn't want that.
So America, the idea of America was anti-monarchy. To a great extent, it was anti-monarchy. We are the first country to be built on that idea of being against monarchy and having a democratic republic. And so if you have a monarchy all of a sudden, well, would people have the right to form their own state and say, well, we don't want to be under the kingdom of America. We want to carve our own little free state?
I mean, again, if I wouldn't want to be in charge of any of these things, but if it was up to me, I would say that would be fine. That's happened all over Europe.
But it wouldn't be fine.
There were plenty of times when that happened historically.
I can give you an example. For example, there was the Bohemian Revolution within the Holy Roman Empire, and it ended with a 20-something year war. It was absolutely brutal. But but we also had, take an example from American history. We had the American Civil War. The South was like, hey, we don't want to be under the American Empire. And they got blitzkrieged. So Lincoln wanted to maintain the Union. So if you have a monarch, he's interested in what? He's interested in maintaining his reign, and he's also interested in providing resources for himself and his kingdom. And also there are elites around him who would be interested in those resources as well. The South was a great producer of cotton and other agricultural goods, and the North did not want to lose power over those lands. So if a bunch of French people in Louisiana say, well, we want to form our own state and speak French, we're like, no, that's not going to happen because the American Empire, even under a republic today, the American Empire doesn't want to lose control over Iraq, for crying. They want to lose control over any other part of the Union. So could and I know you haven't said this in the interview, but you describe yourself as an anarchist on your Twitter page.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how could you have anarchy, which allows free association?
Yeah.
And monarchism, where the king is going to be like, no, can't do that. I'm ruling over you.
Well, like I said, monarchy is kind of the opposition to anarchy, obviously. And so I'm a human being. I'm flawed. I'm also of two minds. One of my minds says that monarchy would be, again, the best way to go in some respects, to keep things as civil as humanly possible, because everyone's looking to this one person to kind of make the decisions. Whereas in an anarchy, people would still die. It would still, especially if there was a revolution to create such a system of government in America. But at the same time, I believe in more of a community-based anarchy, where, like you said, if Louisiana wanted to break away and go, we're just going to speak French, then everybody else goes, yeah, who gives a shit? Go ahead and do it.
But that's not reality.
No, it's not reality. Exactly, it's not reality. We're both sitting right now, and you're in the United States just like I am. It's like we're sitting here right now under what we have, in what we have, and we're kind of just making these rhetorical and these utopian-esque, like you said,
I'm defending
well,
okay, go ahead. I disrupted you.
No. I was gonna say, yeah. No, I was gonna say, like, we sit here and we make these, fantastical, um, you know, what's the word?
Just we're making. You're making a lot of hypotheticals.
All hypothetical. It's all hypothetical.
But I'm defending the status quo. But that's the difference, though. I'm defending the status quo. Mm-hmm. You're defending an idea in your mind and that you want to bring about into fruition. But the thing is that when we were writing each other back and forth, you kind of shocked me a little bit when you said you want to see blood on the streets. Yeah. You want to see blood on the streets.
I mean, for the current political structure, like I said, the people that are in power now, I don't think they should be in power. They don't have the people's best interests in mind. Yes, like you said, we don't have to deal with a lot of what the other countries have to deal with as far as, like, being poor and what have you, and the relative violence and things like that. But they're just constantly trying to get us to fight one another. We're constantly at war with each other. And I feel like if we didn't have that kind of governmental structure where there was one side versus the other side, that things would be a lot more peaceful here. And like I said, utopian, hypothetical.
But and so you think under a monarchy we would just kind of unite? This is like when people say, well, under Biden we're going to unite. But I just don't see how someone who wants to see blood on the streets is going to help unite anything. You want to see blood on the streets of Washington. Have you been to Washington?
Yeah.
D.C.?
No.
I've been to Washington. It's a majority African-American district. And if you want to have blood on the street, and I understand that you are a liberal, I'm going to assume that you're a Democrat.
Yeah.
Why would you as a Democrat want to see a place where the majority is African American? Wouldn't that hurt all the African Americans living in D.C.?
Well, no, I'm saying the politicians. I didn't say anything about the populace.
Okay, but let's say you have for one thing, you would have to go through the American military. U.S. military.
I've had arguments with people before. Whenever I bring up monarchy, they always say, like, well, who's in charge of the military at that point? If somebody wanted to overrule. Or her or whoever. I get that.
You would have to get enough soldiers on your side. You would have to deal with tanks and airplanes, and you would have to deal with the whole might of the U.S. military, which everyone is terrified of. So, and then you would bring war to D.C. That would inevitably encourage other people in different states to want to overthrow their governors, because it's like, we're completely decentralizing. And then you would have a Yugoslavia situation where everyone's literally killing each other. People on the streets are killing each other. You have the left and the right killing each other. So I just don't see what profit it would bring to the world. The only end result you would have is a big pile of bodies. Maybe you want to see that sort of thing. But I don't have those violent utopian visions.
Like I said, I don't want to see innocent people killed. That's not, but unfortunately, like we were talking about the French Revolution and things like that, that's what happens. Is that innocent people end up getting killed in these things.
That's what I'm saying. What you're saying is to me, extremely destructive ideas. You have a very destructive paradigm, because what would stop people from, you want to kill the politicians. Now, which politicians do you want to kill? I don't know. But you would kill a bunch of politicians. Now, you think the politicians are the source of our problems. The reality is that politicians are humans. Politicians are members of our society. They are products of our society. So politicians are simply a symptom of society, be they good or bad. They are the result of the state of our society. So actually, we would want to change society in order to change government. Most people, for some reason, look at society from the top down. I look at it from the bottom up, like a plant starts from the root, and that dictates the health of the rest of the plant. But if you have, so let's say you have a society where lying is considered really not a big deal. Well, politicians are going to lie. But another thing also is that in our society, in order to really be in power, you have to appeal to certain establishments and to certain elites, to certain corporate interests as well. That's how you get money for campaigns. So the dynamics of power in the United States don't just lie in the hands of politicians; they lie in the hands of the wealthy. And then you're going to say, well, we should just kill all the wealthy people, kill all the CEOs or whatever. Maybe that's what you want. But then if you were to do that, it's like, well, where's all that money going to go? Now it's going to go into the hands of the rebels. Now they have the money. Now they're wealthy. Now they're the elite. It's kind of like during the French Revolution, people hated the church because the church had all this money. Then they killed all the priests and the nuns, and then they took all the ecclesiastical property. Then they sold it and they made a bunch of money out of it. So, then they established their own religion as well, the cult of reason and the goddess of reason, and they had their own religion.
The guillotining of the elite, the 1%, is a very left, obviously extremely progressive stance. And do I believe in that in a way? Yes, I do. I mean, in some ways, if you want to think about it, those people have so much goddamn money. I mean, it's ridiculous. And yes, okay, if you want to think about like them starting their business, they've earned it, quote unquote. But there's no reason for them to have enough money to like Jeff Bezos, for example. Like he has. What is it? They said if you saved $5,000 a day from the time that the pyramids were built, you still wouldn't have as much as he does right now. There's no reason for somebody to have that much money, And yes, we live in a governmental structure and in America where you have the freedom to make that money like that. But I just don't think that that's the right system.
Okay, and so you kill Jeff Bezos, God forbid, but let's say you kill Jeff Bezos. And then what happens to all of his money? Where does it go?
It's distributed.
Oh, so basically what the Bolsheviks wanted.
Well, I mean, distributed rightly and not just like in a way that's,
So is everyone going to get free stuff? Like free housing, free everything?
No, you still have to work.
Right, but let's say I want to get a mansion. Are you going to stop me from getting a mansion?
No. Why would it? I mean, if you have enough money for it, sure.
But you just said Bezos has too much money and we have to stop him because he's making too much money. And I must add to that, the reason why Bezos has so much money is because we give him money. We use Amazon. We love Amazon.
Yeah, we do.
So again,
Amazon,
of course, so you also contribute to Bezos getting wealthy. And also Bezos is he's the head of Amazon. He can be thrown out by the board of directors. That's how corporations work. Corporations will fork out tens of millions of dollars to get certain CEOs for their companies because CEOs are really, by the end of the day, they are the decision makers of a corporation. So they're actually very valuable for
they're kind of like the monarch of the corporation.
Exactly. Oh, there you go. Great example. So you want to have a CEO of the United States. Well, corporations have CEOs. And the CEOs, the reason why they make so much damn money is because they are the ones who can move the needle, if you will. Like they can move the needle in a company. I don't run a business corporation, but I do run a nonprofit organization. And I will say that running a nonprofit organization is very similar to running a corporation. In fact, it's called a corporation. And you have a board of directors, and you have the head of the organization, and that head of the organization, I can tell you right now, is huge for running an organization or for running a business. Because he makes very difficult decisions that most people don't want to make. It's like a general. The general may not be in the battlefield, but hell, he makes very difficult decisions, and he has to make a decision of doing certain things that will actually lead to the deaths of people. But he has to make decisions that would lead to the least amount of deaths or the best possible outcome. What you are proposing is literally what all these revolutionaries in the past have proposed. I know you may pick out little, I don't know if you're going to do this, but you may pick out little differences here and there, but that's what people in numerous revolutions wanted. Take the money from those who, basically the have-nots taking from the haves. Let's redistribute it, and then what ends up happening is a bunch of people get killed. And the Chinese did this with the Great Leap Forward, and it was the Great Leap to Destruction because tens of millions of people died. The Bolsheviks did this. They ended up butchering tens of millions of people. Because what happens is, well, we're going to make sure that everyone in society is equal, or everyone in society can make it. So everyone's going to get a house, but then everyone has to work. Like you said, we all have to work.
Yeah.
So people are going to work in the rice fields, and then it's like, well, you're not working hard enough. So now the end principle is, well, who works and who doesn't? Because we all have to make sure this utopia functions. So it's all about working, but we're kind of working for free. So there's not a whole lot of incentive to make lots of money. And like you said, why should anyone earn that much money? So you want to put limits on how much money people can make. So you want to control that. I mean, for an anarchist, you are pretty controlling. But you won't.
Yeah, I feel you there. But we have currently in America, we have things called pensions, where people, they work into a certain point and then they can just retire and just make money by not working.
Yeah.
So we have that already.
We have certain forms of that where, yes, elderly people, people in the military, they can get pensions, and I'm all for that.
Politicians.
What's that? Politicians? Yeah, that's also true. But I actually believe in a balance. I don't believe that we should... I mean, I am a Christian, right? I don't believe in, might makes right or anything like that. But I do believe that we should have a society where we have equal opportunity, and also we help those who need help. The elderly, single moms, people who are very, very poor. Homeless people should also be given some sort of help as well. But ultimately, given work to make a life for themselves. I do believe in government assistance to society. What I am not for is massive revolutions against the establishment so that we can just bring about chaos, steal a bunch of money from people, and then redistribute it. But then there's a whole quagmire of difficulties in that type of situation. Who's going to get the money? And then you're going to have people who are like, oh, I want more money than the other person, or you could have interest. You could have interest intervening in that, different other people's interest as well. I just don't see, like you yourself said, we already have some form of government assistance to society. It's like, okay, well, what exactly are you complaining about then? Like, why do you want to destroy this whole system?
Is it enough? Is what I'm saying.
Obviously, it is. I mean, we can always do better. But I don't see, it's like the difference between Luther, like Martin Luther, the reformer, the rebel, really, the Protestant rebel, and Erasmus. Erasmus believed in reforming the Catholic Church. Luther believed in destroying it. So Erasmus said, well, we can reform it, but we don't have to destroy it. My belief is we can definitely always better society. But why destroy it? And
so
why cause a bloodbath? Why cause a bloodbath?
How would you reform the United States?
What's that?
How would you reform the United States?
Well, I mean, I'm not... again, we're probably going to get into hypotheticals, but I would start out by getting rid of property taxes. I would get rid of property taxes. I know people will disagree with me on that, but you get rid of, for example, in I think it was in Michigan, they raised property taxes up way too high, and then you had people who literally bought their homes without, paid off the loan and everything, and now you can't live here anymore. That to me is terrible, and that goes against the idea of private property. If I got a loan from the bank, but then I couldn't pay off the loan, I can understand, okay, you can't pay off the loan, you have to foreclose on the house. But if you buy a house on a loan, but then you pay off that loan, it's like, well, do you really own your property? Because now you have to pay a bunch of money to the state, and if you don't pay it, well, you lose your house. That to me is unjust.
Yeah.
That to me, that I would get rid of that. Now, as a Christian, I would like to see the end of abortion, but again, I'm not naive enough to think that, well, we can just illegalize abortion, and that's going to get rid of it. As long as people want abortions, you're going to have abortions. So the way to ultimately remove infanticide or abortion is to convince enough people that abortion is wrong. So I wouldn't rely solely on a government measure for that.
Well, do you believe in individual rights?
To a certain extent, yes. But at the same time, I think we are a collective body, and we have to do certain things to benefit each other. Like it's not all I'm by myself and to hell with everyone else.
Yeah.
Like for example, we have coronavirus, and we should do things as a society to curtail the spread of coronavirus. But we're divided even on that.
We are.
Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Oh, well, yeah.
Anyway.
That's definitely hypothetical.
Those are hypothetical. But I mean, getting rid of property taxes would never happen. But I think it's a lot more practical than saying I want to see blood on the streets of Washington D.C.
How about getting rid of the IRS in general?
Well, taxes are necessary for a society. If you get rid of taxes, then you get rid of the state's ability to like fund all sorts of things like police force, fire department, Medicare, Medicaid, the military. Like, so obviously you need taxes, and if you're going to enforce taxes, you're going to have a system in place by which to guarantee that people are going to pay taxes. Are taxes too high? Yeah, they are. But at the same time, we are the Roman Empire of today. Like, the bottom line is that America is an empire, and we need all these taxes to maintain the American empire.
Yeah.
If you want to reduce America to just an individual state, no hegemony at all, then we could do that. The problem is Russia would rise up, and all sorts of regional powers would rise up to. It would be like Alexander the Great dying.
China's already kind of overtaking us in a lot of ways too right now.
We're a little bit over an hour, so I just want to wrap things up here. I'll give you the final word, but I just want to say that that you as an anarchist, what you're asking for would lead to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. It would be akin to something like the Yugoslav War, which led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands. I just don't see how you could push forward with your idea without putting millions of people in jeopardy, not just being killed by bullets, but being killed by starvation, because you would have supply chains that would be greatly hindered and impeded by war. If you look at the situation in Syria, there's people starving in certain areas. Also, the fact that in order to have a revolution and maintain your seat of power, you would have to appeal to certain basically power brokers within society, those with money, those that you actually want to get rid of, like Jeff Bezos. You would have to maintain that those people are appeased. Bottom line. That's what, if you look at the kings of the Middle Ages, they had to appeal to certain elites as well. That's what ended King Louis XV. So I just don't see like how you could push forward with your idea without having like a tremendous amount of suffering and destruction. But I'll give you the final word.
Like I said, this could be done peacefully. I don't think that there have to be that many people killed, but there have to be some killed. Like I said, in revolutions past, like the Russian and French revolutions. And at the end of the day, whether or not it would come to fruition, again, is it's an if and not really a when, not even a maybe. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. Monarchism it's a dying thing. There's only a handful of us, like you said before, and yeah.
Okay, I don't think. I don't think aspiring to something like the French Revolution is great, because look what happened to all the people who were counter-revolutionary. A lot of them ended up killed. Over 100,000 people were butchered in the Vendée area of France. People were trampled under horses, drowned, beheaded, butchered. There were rapes. There was even some cases of cannibalism that went on in the French Revolution. So I'm glad that people like yourself are a minority. I hope it remains that way, and I hope that what you want never happens.
God bless you.
All right, man. It was good. I'm glad we could have a good faith discussion.
Yeah, of course, man. It was nice.
Yeah, it was fun.
I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, and yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Well, have a good night.
You too, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, later.
Bye.